What is the strangest mystery that is still unsolved? The lost A-bomb off the coast of America, which the US government said not to worry about in the 50s and tried to cover up, was dumped in the ocean in an aviation accident, and it's still lost to this day. 100x more powerful than what was dropped in Japan. There was this other bomb that fell out of a bomb bay above the US. They told everyone it was fine, but later revealed that 3 out of 4 safety thingies had been actuated. Only one more and there would have been an explosion. I can't find it, but it should be in here along with other accidents, etc. I remember seeing a video about a woman that after getting divorced started getting stalked and assaulted in her own house. Every time police would arrive, no one more than her was at the scene. Sometimes she would appear with bruises. Once she appeared with a screwdriver through her hand. This happened so many times that police started ignoring her calls after the investigation on her husband, and on the case left no suspects. 3 months later she disappeared, just to reappear next to a highway in the middle of the desert, miles away from her house, with her hands tied. Dead. Autopsy later confirmed she was beaten to death. Creepiest speep I know. Edit. The case is the death of Cindy James. Some of the details are different, but it's all detailed there. The Oakville blob. Much %20 as %20 20% 20 square %20 miles. In 1994, there was a rainstorm in Oakville. Only the raindrops were a strange clear substance that had the consistency of jello. Lots of people experienced flu-like symptoms after coming into contact with it. And people's dogs and cats all over the city were dying. When a local hospital ran a lab test on the substance after one of the patients suggested it, it was found that whatever this mysterious rain was, it had human white blood cells in it. Sometime after that, a sample was also sent to the Washington State Health Laboratory, where it was being researched by epidemiologist Mike McDowell. After he determined that it was man-made and speculated that it was some sort of matrix for transporting viruses/bacteria, the sample suddenly went missing from the containment facility, and his supervisor told him not to ask any questions. There are no known samples of the stuff anywhere today, despite being sent to several different facilities by various Oakville residents. So yeah, I'd personally say that this was clearly some sort of bioweapon test run. But by whom? I'd like to give the US government the benefit of the doubt here and assume it wasn't us testing something like that on our own citizens. But if it wasn't, why would it have been covered up like that? And you'd think an event like this would be a lot less obscure. Also, even if it being a bioweapon seems super obvious, how the heck did whoever dispersed it manage to make it rain over an entire city for several days? This dude got lost in the catacombs, and they found camera footage of his journey. But at some point he drops the camera and just starts to run. As far as I know, nobody has found out WTF happened to him. He probably panicked, heard a rat, something fell, and ran in an intentionally erratic pattern because he thought something was chasing him. Then he got lost on his way back. I remember seeing this video on YouTube of this guy who went to explore an old Civil War era mine in the US. He reached the end and made his way back, and about halfway through really loud whispers suddenly came from where the back of the mine, and he bolted out of there. Really spooky and unexplained until someone in the comments noticed the whispers followed the exact cadence of a sentence he spoke about 5 seconds ago. So it probably was his own voice that got morphed and echoed back to him in a weird way. Spooky AF though. The Miyazawa family. Just listened to the Case File podcast on this and it has my mind blown. Someone entered the family home around 11:30 p.m. Killed everyone. Ate some ice cream. Took a nap. Pooped and didn't flush. Changed clothes and left like 8 hours after the crime. 20 years on and we don't know who or why. Would there not be a load of DNA from the killer in the poop? Speeploads. On April 19, 1995, a truck bomb detonated outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The explosion killed 168 in what was the deadliest terrorist attack on the United States until 9/11, to date. It still remains the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in the country. One of the lesser-known things about this is the case of the missing leg. Investigators discovered the leg laying among the rubble and identified it belonging to Lakeisha Levy. The only problem was, she'd already been buried with both her legs. She was exhumed. Her severed leg was placed in her coffin while the other leg was taken to the FBI laboratory for identification. Since it had been embalmed, a DNA sample was unable to be obtained. The extra left leg, which had been mistakenly buried with Levy, is suspected to belong to an unidentified 169th victim, whose body had mostly disintegrated in the blast. This has led people to suspect there was an additional terrorist involved, even though perpetrators Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols had been convicted, with 2 others later identified as accomplices. So who was the possible additional bomber? They still remain unidentified now 25 years after the attack. I remember this bombing so well due to all the coincidental connections I had with it. My uncle worked across the street in an office with a window view. He took that day off and his office was covered in glass from the explosion. His son was one of the federal marshals that escorted Timothy McVeigh back to OKC and fingerprinted him. My GF at the time was questioned by the FBI because she was buying dog food at the coop at approximately the same time they were buying the fertilizer for the bomb. An unsolved murder of an entire family in Japan, which to this day remains unsolved despite DNA evidence indicating the ancestry of the killer. A sand sample left by the killer which was traced back to the California desert near Edwards AFB. And even sesame seeds in the killer's stool. Perhaps not the absolute strangest. But in March of 2020, the Windows market share for the long discontinued Windows XP skyrocketed by about 10% in China. This spike in Windows XP use for just 1 month is for unknown reasons. Some people think the Chinese government could have been looking for security flaws in the operating system to take advantage of. After all, lots of sensitive government equipment still runs on Windows XP. Another one is Colonel Philip Shu's death. On April 16, 2003, 54-year-old Colonel Philip Shu left his Texas home and headed to work. 2 hours later, he was found dead in his car, an apparent victim of a car crash. The car was caved in on the driver's side and Philip suffered major head trauma as a result. He was killed instantly. This is where it gets weird. Philip had a tear in his t-shirt under his fatigues. There, they could see a 6-inch vertical gash in his chest. Above the entrance to the 6 gash were at least 5 scratch marks, which the autopsy report said were consistent with hesitant marks. Both his nipples had been removed with surgical precision. The 5th digit on his left hand had been amputated and his left ear had been lacerated down to the bone. Duct tape was dangling from both of his wrists and the top of his boots. It was ruled a suicide. The suicide of Lavina Johnson, a black female U.S. Army private who was found shot to death inside a burning tent with a broken nose, black eyes, broken teeth, raped and acid burns on her genitals in July 2005. U.S. Army ruled her death a suicide. Magdalena Zuk, a Polish woman who died in Egypt. She had arranged a trip to Egypt at very short notice as a surprise for her partner. He didn't have a valid passport and couldn't get one on time. So she went alone. Almost immediately, she began to act incredibly erratic. but was being helped by a Polish-speaking Egyptian man at the hotel. The hotel didn't want her. The hospital turned her away. And when she tried to board an earlier flight home, she was not allowed to board because of her behavior. Eventually she was admitted to hospital but, despite being restrained, managed to jump out of the window. The boyfriend had arranged a mutual friend to come get her, but he arrived to find her dead. This conversation with her boyfriend is one of the most disturbing things I've seen. There is evidence that the Egyptian man actually knew the boyfriend and theories that the boyfriend was somehow in on all this. Which is all very bizarre considering she planned the trip without him even knowing.